All right, so what are we doing for episode 61? We need to record something here. Do you got any ideas? Chris, can you even hear me? Hello? Is your microphone working? Chris.
I have an idea.
We're going to need a bigger. All right, so again, episode 61. This is going to be a very special episode. I think we all know what this one's going to be about. But before we jump into that, as is the new format, we're going to take just a couple of quick seconds and look at who won last episode, the big 60th episode. So, Chris, I'm going to open up that liquor cabinet. And don't forget, if you ever want to look at the scores, go ahead and go to nicepollpod.com, click on scoreboard, and by gosh, there are all of the scores in their obnoxious glory. And let's take a look at my favorite part of this little section of the show, which is Jeff's polls. So, really quick, we actually got a little bit of credit each for the Rodney Allen Rippey mention, right? I mentioned that I had a T-shirt of Rodney Allen Rippey when I was a kid. It said, "Make life a little easier." I did get some points for that. I also did a little, I guess, sort of a comparison, right, of somebody taking a food pill, right? In the future, we were all going to have pills, right? This one's for apple pie. This one is for roast beef. And we would just take it and we would be able to.
Right.
And I made the connection that that is very similar to the gum chewing scene in Willy Wonka, right? With Violet Beauregard. So I did get some points for that comparison. Also, Zardoz, which is a very, very deep cut, right? A very, I wouldn't say a very rare Sean Connery movie in terms of even knowing about its existence, wouldn't you?
Okay, yeah, let's go with rare. Yeah, that's
Well, what would you call it? I don't know.
I don't know, hairy ass Sean Connery and, like, this weird red Speedo with, like, a belt around it, and I think he's got, like, kind of a ponytail. Yeah, we'll stick with rare.
It's a very deep cut. It's rare, I guess, that anybody would bring it up or mention it, or certainly that anybody would have watched it. But it is science fiction, cult fandom. Man, it's up here. So blah blah blah. I got some points for that. Ha. Then I did kind of this trifecta. I was talking about all of the different Charlton Heston movies where somehow he was the MC, if you will, the main go-to actor for all of these dystopian movies like Soylent Green, Planet of the Apes, and Omega
Uh-huh.
Man. And of course, you
Uh,
made the comment that, well, that's because he's a giant overactor and that's what they needed,
right.
right? For these movies. Obviously, that kind of a cheesy approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you can
Absolutely.
either part the Red Sea or part the fucking Red Sea, right? There's no
Right.
halfway.
Right.
Um, yeah.
There's no subtlety to that at all. You know what I mean? You gotta go
Yeah.
all in
Gotta
if
go
you're
all in.
parting the Red Sea or discovering that Earth was now, run by apes.
What are you supposed to do? Just whimper quietly when you see half of the Statue of Liberty sticking out of the sand in Cabo San Lucas, apparently? Um,
Yeah. Oh,
right
oh, well,
on.
that sucks. Yeah.
I did get some points for a personal deep poll, which was the Spanish teacher that Chris and I both had right around 7th grade, and I think I also had her later. Maybe I had Mr. Wilson later on, I think, but,
Oh god, I had
um
Mr. Wilson too.
yeah, and, she was just a very outgoing, flamboyant, almost like a Miss Frizzle, right, from the Magic School Bus, almost kind of like that type of a personality. That got me some points, and then Chris, I did go into quite heavily my disappointment, I guess you would say, that these Star Trek replicators, the actual food replicators, aren't real, and then I also tried to imagine what the hell would you even feed into that to get that? Like, what is that? What do I
Uh-huh.
put in it to get whatever I want? So,
What are your ingredients?
All right, let's jump right into Chris's polls. Number one, lots of mentioning of Logan's Run. We have mentioned that in the past, but just the whole food pill culture takedown, as it says right here, integrating Logan's Run's ideals into a rant on failed tech predictions. And Chris, that rant was epic. That was one of the rare times that I've seen you truly rant. That was capital R. Great job on that. You did something
Thank you,
very
sir.
subtle that got you 26,000 points, which was your Merv Griffin ooh, the little ooh. Can you give us one more of those? What did Merv Griffin do?
Well, ooh, or kind of like, but
That sounds more
I
like George Takei. Oh my. It's like,
ooh, ooh, I don't the problem
yeah,
is yes, because now I'm laughing. I don't know if I can accurately, reinterpret Merv. If
right.
this were replay, if this were Major League Baseball, I thought I should have. I don't know. I know we can't argue with AI, but I thought I should have earned a little bit more than 26,000 for throwing the Merv ooh in there. But hey, the score is the score. I'm not going to complain. But you know how much I like to win. But this isn't looking good. I don't think.
Then you did a Dirk Pearson reference. And Chris, I had
Hmm.
never heard of Dirk Pearson, right? So this was a guy that was on
Hmm.
a lot of talk shows and he was a
Hmm.
predictor of the future. This was the guy who allegedly pulled science into his predictions,
Hmm.
right? Kind of like a Carl Sagan, but it sounds more like also a guy that would sell Amway, frankly. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
And he made the prediction that we would all live for 800 years, which, as you know, I am firmly against that. I have looked at my 401k and there's no mother effing way it's going to make it for another 795 years. It's not going to happen. But you also got a really nice little present here of 26,000 points for bringing in Emmett Kelly, the famous clown who was the hobo clown, right? And
Clown. He
hobo,
was
am I wrong? Wasn't that kind of his thing?
right. Yes, he was humorously homeless, if you wanna put it that way. But, yeah, we could do an entire show on how that was just "Hey, man, look at the guy with the stick and all his belongings in a pillowcase and, tattered clothing."
Hey, Martha, look at this idiot. He ain't got nowhere to go. Let's sit down and laugh. You're right. It's really
Or
effed up. Yeah.
let's take it a step further. "Hey, Emmett Kelly, nice sensitivity there, man. That's
Yeah.
that's your shtick? That's your
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
That is your thing. What's next? A guy rolling around in a wheelchair? I mean, Emmett, good work.
Why am I picturing him
Jesus.
just like walking down, Skid Row one day, looking at a bunch of people in a horrible situation and thinking, now that's fucking funny. This, my
Exactly.
friends, this is where humor goes right here.
Yeah. God, fuck Emmett Kelly. I'm sorry, go ahead, keep going.
And then, as I mentioned, we shared custody of, this sounds very strange, of the Rodney Allen Rippey situation, right? Because your dad actually has a photo of him and some of the folks that he was working with. Well, you explained it. I want you to set up this photo, Chris, because it's important that you show the photo. Otherwise, you don't get credit. Because here's what AI said, Chris. Chris casually drops that his dad has an actual photo from the 1970s with none other than Rodney Allen Rippey sitting, right, on a man's leg, basically, like a tiny celebrity ventriloquist doll, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
so the AI is saying, like any cryptid sighting or UFO photo, proof is required. So until the
Right.
audience can actually see this photo, yeah, we
Mhm.
can't give you the points. But there are
Right.
100,000 points riding on this, Chris. So do you have that photo?
What do you think? Can we look in the liquor can we pull it? Can we look in the liquor?
All
Can
right.
can we pull it and then I can give a little context?
Okay. I was being very dramatic. Ladies and gentlemen,
I know
Rodney
you
Allen
were.
Rippey. Here you go. Let's take a look. That is him. That is
I
absolutely him. Chris, give us some context here.
Well, just and first of all, AI, and yes, and I think we have clarified. My dad actually doesn't have this photo. I have this photo since he's passed away 18 years ago. But if you look at this photo, I cherish this photo, and this is actually. it's a glossy 8 by 10 black and white photo of my dad and a couple of colleagues. Some sort of, I don't even understand. I don't know. I think this was some sort of marketing association thing or something because my dad was in the booze business, which you famously could not get at Jack in a Box even to this day. So
Right.
somehow he ends up with his colleagues and with a photo op with the one, the only Rodney Allen Rippey. And there's
Right on.
so much that screams about this photo. First of all, just the fact that Rodney himself is the focal point and he is, you mentioned your t-shirt. He is wearing that t-shirt, Jeff. And if they're a bigger, even then, and I'm thinking, I don't even know when this is, 74, 75, something like this. Um, that's a baller move to wear a t-shirt with your own face on it. Okay, that's just to me, there's nothing. That's
It
man, you
is.
got some confidence there.
Yeah.
And then speaking of the sartorial splendor of this photo, look at my dad's leisure suit. Look at that droopy mustache, and the patterns on everyone else. This even Rodney's pants. This is a time capsule. And so I think this I think if there's a nice pull time capsule, maybe we should create one. This one goes right in it because man, this just screams so many different way. Just picking this photo apart. Um, again, it's cherished. It's a cherished heirloom, and not everybody can understand it because could show that to my kids and they don't even actually know that that's their grandfather because it was so long ago. But and they sure as hell don't know about Roddy and Rippy. But
We can put 100,000 points on the board. And Chris, I know that you already knew this, but the audience may not know that this weekend at the big music festival, Sartorial Splendor is opening up for Rodney's Pants. I, I do know for a fact that that was announced. So
well,
we're
good,
good to go on that lineup. They are
good.
great bands. If you haven't seen Sartorial Splendor or God forbid Rodney's Pants, it's a must. It's a must. It's an amazing show. Well, that's such a cool photo, dude. Seriously, that is absolutely
Uh,
amazing. All right, well, let's
yeah,
look at the actual scores here and add those up. And let's do the tally.
yeah. All right.
So that is damn close. So for those of you that
Mhm.
are listening in and not watching the show right now, that is fine. But Chris got 279,000 points, which is pretty damn good, especially with that photo coming in at the last
Mm.
minute to save it. And I got 308,500. God knows where the
Piss off,
500 came
Jeff.
from. I don't quite
Okay,
understand that.
piss all the way off. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. And I'm not gonna complain. I'm not gonna complain about my Merv Griffin not getting enough.
Well, cool. So that wraps up the score for episode 60. And Chris and everyone that listened to episode 60, as we mentioned in that episode, Chris and I did a lot of thinking about when we were kids growing up in the 70s and the 80s, what our vision of the future was. Jetpacks, flying cars, food pills, replicators, teleportation, all that stuff, versus what we actually got. Right. And Chris, we actually have in the liquor cabinet a celebrity psychic. Now, this is somebody that
Oh,
you may or may not
ooh.
know, but this is one of those guys that is just, has a huge cult following. People love this guy. I guess his prophecies normally do come true. And yes, he is absolutely a celebrity. So, Chris, without further ado, the great prognosticator. His accuracy is way off the charts. Ladies and gentlemen, the man with the visions himself, Sir Simon Milligan.
Oh, yes. Welcome, welcome to the pit of ultimate darkness, which is actually the pleasant office where Kevin McDonald lives. If he made more money, I'd have a better pit of ultimate darkness. But there you go, the map. Some 12-year-old nephew made a dinosaur. He forgets which one. They're in-laws. Yes, I'm Sir Simon Milligan, and I walk along the path of evil. It's a twisting, curving path that actually leads to quite a charming block garden. But beyond that evil, I walk outside. I walk outside. I face the demons and I walk outside, and occasionally someone comes up to me and asks me if there's a Starbucks. And I always tell them it's that way, knowing full well that it's that way. Of course, they usually come across a Starbucks. There's so many Starbucks in the world. My is itchy. But the evil of corporations is what I was going to say. My dire predictions for the future. I predict that the planet will not look like this anymore, and it will look like that cute dinosaur. Due to the climate crisis, the climate, which of course Satan started, and I helped. By going to an iceberg and living on an iceberg for 7 years, and I had a candle and I lit it every now and then, and it was sort of blown out right away. I thought it was a practical joke from Satan to send me up there, and then later I found out it was. I didn't help the crisis at all, but it was a good joke. I lost 3 fingers due to frostbite. These are man-made fingers. I made them with my good hand. There. Now my good hand, I lost a few fingers making my hand over. It's complicated. My predictions: dogs will take over the world. Dogs will take over the world, and it will be a lot better. The president, the dog of the United States, will be much better than the current one. Men will not be able to grow mustaches. I see the future. I'm Nostradamus of facial hair. Mustaches. And everything that we dreamed of as kids in the 70s, the flying pack. Well, everything's sort of invented except the flying pack. And who wants to go to the flying pack? I see in the future people suffering from air sickness more than ever, and there will be no flying pack on our backs. That's all I can think of right now. Jeff and Chris from Nice Bowl Podcast. I am Sir Simon Milligan, and you are staring at the face of evil. And remember, always embrace the hellfire, hellfire, hellfire. And please, if you're going to get a dog, don't go to breeders. Go to a rescue. My dog is outside. Her name's Alaska. I'm afraid of her. She keeps looking at my ear, and I think she wants to bite off, which would be evil. Evil!
Um, I have no response to that other than thank you, Simon Milligan.
You open up that liquor cabinet, you never know what's gonna be in there. It could be, again, it could be Danny Bonaducci, it could be, Malcolm McDowell, it could be Sir Simon Milligan, AKA Kevin McDonald, one of the comedy geniuses from, Kids in the Hall, which, Chris, I think you mentioned you really never watched that show too much when it was out? Yeah,
No, I'm very familiar with it and familiar with some of the sketches and characters, probably because at the time it was right. Now I could just pull it right if this show was on, hey, I'd go pull
yeah.
it up and watch it when I see, and but again, definitely appreciate the influence. And my only thing is if he had only been wearing a t-shirt with his face on it.
We are super grateful to Kevin McDonald for reprising that character. And Chris, if you do get a chance, please check out on the YouTube, right? At least a couple of sketches. One of my favorites with him was he walks into a record store and he's thinking about purchasing a Doors album. But the guy that runs the record store is like, "Oh, you can't just purchase a Doors album until you've
Mhm.
lived the life of Jim Morrison." And he literally makes him run out of the store and, like, do all these crazy things before he can be worthy of purchasing the Doors album, right? And, anyway, it was just super non sequitur, hilarious stuff. Anyone that has never seen Kids in the Hall, please, I encourage you to do it.
I don't want to go off the rails here, and and mention, I don't know. We don't talk a lot about books on this podcast.
We really don't. I don't know why that is. We don't, right?
The minutia of old PSAs and board games and cartoons, sure, but books, today in popular culture, uh, I don't know if the things that blow up come from books the way they did maybe even in the 70s. Definitely, I don't think they definitely do. It's just not, they're just not the thing that they were. But started as a book published in 1974, and I have it right here again. It's like, here it is. This is an original dog-eared, beaten up hardback copy of the book Jaws, or a novel, okay, in case you couldn't really tell what it was. Um, Most people don't think about Jaws as starting out as a novel, and great, little this hardback from 1974, um, $5.49, Jeff. $5.49 for this
Wow.
hardback.
That's a lot of
Um,
money back then. Holy shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
adjusted for, what are they? They're literally like 35 or maybe I would know if I actually bought hardback books. So I think a book gonna cost you 30, 35 bucks, retail, hardback like that, at least. Anyway, Jaws changed my life, and I think it changed yours, and I say that in the sense that and I think this is I just wanna have a conversation about it because we're heading up on the 50th anniversary of Jaws. Summer is starting up, and if I remember correctly, and we were both young, and I'm not sure about you. I don't know if again, we've mentioned Jaws and made Jaws references. Not sure how old, I saw it in the theater. Yes, another one of those long lines of maybe inappropriate films for my age, which you've established. But
Yeah, yeah.
I remember it as if it was yesterday. God, that sounds freaking corny, but it's true. The movie itself, the everything that set off in June of 1975, um, changed popular culture, changed films, changed the way we look at films, changed the way people went in the ocean, changed the way we thought about sharks. And, what I mean, again, all those things what first pops into your head when I say, Jeff, when you saw Jaws?
Well, I had a bunch of friends who had seen it before me, and they had already kind of done a spoiler alert on the super scary stuff, right? Like, the scene
Those
where
bastards.
early on in the movie, there's a diver who's looking at a boat that got kinda torn up, and you see the guy's head
Matt
roll
Hooper,
out and his
played by
eyes.
Richard
Yeah,
Dreyfuss. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. And that was one of the big shock, early scares. But of course,
Mhm.
having then gone and finally seen it, and I was a pretty impressionable kid, right? So I'm 9 years old, you are too. I
Right,
think we're both in
right.
4th grade. When I finally go see it and I'm trying to act brave in front of my friends, I'm the guy who's, looking through my my fingers, I think like the rest of everybody. And the absolute iconic dun, 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 just insane what you can do with 2 notes, right? Um, Absolutely incredible, and I think really the most horrific part of that movie that was so brilliantly done is the opening with the girl that's swimming out to the buoy and just not knowing and, getting pulled underwater and wondering, "What is this?" And then when you finally see her
Yeah.
actually moving around with something underneath her, and then, as I recall, the book was so cool because it starts with part of her body had already washed up on shore, and a bunch of crabs are on it, and it was very
Mhm,
graphic, right? And
mhm.
somebody discovers that there's human remains on the beach,
Right.
and I believe that's kind of like one of the opening visuals, but you can tell me more, Chris. But yeah, it haunted me. It absolutely haunted me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and again, like I said, it's for some like, we had the book, and I didn't read the book until and it was floating around my house, and yeah, probably not inappropriate, but because there's some subplots in the book that don't make it into the movie, that the mafia is kinda controls the town, and so that's why they cannot close the beaches, and actually, uh Hooper, who was played in the movie by Richard Dreyfuss, and Ellen Brody, the chief's wife, played by Lorraine Gary, who's actually a studio exec's wife in real life. Wasn't in a lot of movies, I don't think. I don't think outside of the Jaws franchise, you didn't see her in a lot of movies. Wonder why.
Right.
They have an affair. That's in the book. These things are all kind of thrown out for the film. But so I remember reading after going to see this film with kids on the block. Yes, 9 years old. Freaking out, but and so then going into knowing my family had the book and reading it and going, oh, there's a lot more here. Um, but it was not just a movie, it was kind of a phenomenon, and it started off the summer blockbusters. It started off with studios saying, "Hey, you know what? We need a big movie at least once a year." Again, lines around the block, uh, for
Oh
get it, right? You
yeah.
had to go and stand in line. You couldn't buy obviously, you couldn't buy tickets in advance. You couldn't buy them on the internet. You couldn't do any of those things, and, and just sort of that and the jump scares, and, yes, sitting in the theater. Oh, yeah, that scene exactly, okay? When the head comes out and it actually actually if you look back he's actually got a shark's tooth, which is his proof. He grabs a shark's tooth out of the hole out of the hole in the hull of the boat, and he drops it, right? So that's Ben Harper, I think, is the name of the fisherman. But anyway, those things, yeah, we hadn't really seen stuff like that in the movies before, where the little kid Alex Kittner gets essentially eaten on his
Yeah,
raft. We all had those
yeah.
inflatable rafts. Remember those
Oh,
inflatable
yeah.
rafts with the little
Terrible.
plastic
So
rope
bad.
on the end of them?
Oh, yeah.
So that turns into like
Yep.
a fountain of blood, and the kids. And we had never seen anything quite like that in a film before. And so it was a huge hit. At the same time, it freaked people out about going into the ocean. And so people it's summer, and it kind of almost mirrored it in real life, because what happens in the movie, they close the beach, or they attempt to close the beach. They don't close the beach. This kid gets killed, gets eaten what? On the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And in real life, people were afraid to go in the ocean. People were afraid to go swimming, especially at night, because of Chrissy Watkins, the character who dies in the opening scene,
Mhm.
right? It's just like, your sharks. Did you know that sharks fed at night and they hunted at night? It's like, bullshit, I didn't know that. But it just created all of these. It was hugely entertaining, hugely impactful. We flocked to it, and yet, can you think that, no other movie really made you think and altered your behavior, or made you think that, gee, you know what I mean? It was just like, it was a real life horror movie. And I think that, and it was a phenomenon, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, completely. I yesterday was lucky enough to get on a boat that is owned by a friend of mine and head over
Uh-huh.
to Catalina Island. And for those of you
Nice.
that maybe do or don't know, here in Southern California, we have an island that's not too far away. You can get on a little sailboat and be over there in an hour or so. So, really cool. But while we were out in the ocean and about halfway there, and this is the open ocean, Chris, it's very rare that I am actually out on open ocean water, not the typical situation for you and me, right, Chris, where we might go down to the beach and maybe go
Uh-huh.
in, 50 yards or something offshore. And
Uh-huh.
so my buddy jumps off the boat, and thankfully, Chris, we were smart enough to keep one human on the boat because that is my next worst nightmare, right? The boat floats away, and like a bunch of idiots, we're like stuck in the middle of the ocean, like, you know,
Uh-huh.
complete morons. Anyway, I faced one of my biggest fears, which is swimming in open water, knowing full well that beneath me, it's hundreds and hundreds of feet down, and anything could be down there. And one of my other buddies that was on this trip, he looks at me in the water and says, "Dude, you have to look down. It is so blue. It's incredible." And the only reason I did it was so that I don't look like a complete chump. My ego
Uh-huh.
would be a little bit wounded. So I did it. I looked down, and it's exactly what I thought, the most horrifying thing on the planet for me. Other people look down and they see just an endless blue and think, "Oh, that's so calming. That's so peaceful." Dude, that is my worst nightmare. Is you think the shark is going to just start coming up from the bottom right at you.
Exactly.
All I can get in my head, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, man, that is really pretty. Well, I guess I'm getting a little chilly. I'm gonna get back on the boat." And even as I'm getting in the boat, Chris, I'm worried that my ankle or my foot is gonna be grabbed back in. It just in the back of your
Uh-huh.
mind, you can't help but think that. Good news, Chris, I did not die, in case you're
You're
wondering. There was
alive. You're
there
alive.
was no shark. There were dolphins, but no sharks.
But and that's just, and I think it's literally like, I think the odds of, like, getting attacked by a shark are like 1 in 11 million or something like that.
Yeah.
So they're slightly better than winning the lottery, which I think is like 1 in 14 million or something like that. No, you never gave it a second thought before this film, before the book, before the film, before the hysteria, before how it became part of pop culture, and it almost instantaneously, it's had like what, 3 sequels, all of which were just in, just declining quality. But we then had films that kind of, hey, we want to capture that Jaws thing. They had like there was a movie I think called Grizzly, right? That was like a grizzly bear, and there was
Oh,
Orca, which
yeah.
was of course about a killer whale, and like
Yeah.
I wanna say Tentacles, which is like an octopus. I mean, so it's just like, "Hey, we need
Right.
our sea creature" kind of movie.
Right.
Everybody endlessly ripped it off. Nobody could ever replicate that. The way, like I said, it altered behavior, it altered movie making. It was Steven Spielberg's 2nd film, okay,
Mhm.
that he
Mhm.
directed. After that, then he went on a run of, like, Close Encounters and Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. It was like, he could have it's like, "Wait a minute, Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., he could have keeled over right then and become like, and it's like, well, he's a legend, right? And it's just like, no, because then he went on to make Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, right? And the other Indiana Jones movies and Saving Private Ryan and still making films today. but it's just like it took a hold. It was instantly parodied, right? It's like they're doing land sharks on Saturday Night Live, and
Yeah, yeah.
the opening of Airplane used the Jaws music and a plane cutting through the clouds.
Oh,
It
that's
just
right. I forgot about
it
that.
just took hold, literally, and like I said, sharks all of a sudden, sharks became this big, and then they made modern movies like now, like Meg and Deep Blue Sea, where you're trying to get the shark thing, and the sharks are CGI and all this kind of stuff. There's
Yeah.
legendary stories about how the movie was made, and with this big mechanical shark. Universal Studios, right? We've all been to Universal
Yeah,
Studios
yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
seen the shark attack, and it's cheesy as hell, and we loved it as kids, and I think I still love it. Um, but it's just I think about it, and I always think about it in summer, and I always think about it going to the beach, and you mentioned jumping in open water. You I don't I go to the beach, I'm fortunate enough to live close to the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't go in the water. I
No.
stand up to my ankles, and maybe my daughter rides her boogie board, but
I have a friend, I have a friend, Russ, who loves going in the ocean on purpose at nighttime and then purposely digging underneath rocks. So he'll dive down and he'll start putting his hand under rocks and digging for lobster. And, he's probably got a flashlight in his mouth. I don't know what he does down there, but to me, it is insane that anyone would purposely go underwater, poking your flashlight. What's the best that can happen? You get the shit scared out of you by a harmless fish. That's the best that can happen, right? But what about
Mhm.
moray eels? Now, I'm sure they don't really exist in that section that he's in, but in my mind, they do. And they'll take your fucking hand off, is what they'll do, right? And this guy just doesn't care. He's just like, yeah, man, it's the greatest thing ever. I love it. He doesn't really sound like that, by the way, but in my mind, he does. So that's incredible to me. And Chris, I completely remember, like you, going back to the beach, and we were all kind of joking and like, ha, yeah, Jaws is going to get
Mhm.
us, ha ha ha. But no, it's seriously changed how long I stayed in the water, how deep I
Mhm.
went, how many waves I caught before I just kind of went, okay, I'm going to call it a day, all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be
And you
because
you say that, sorry, you said that Spielberg is very young when he did this, but Chris, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he in his 20s when he
he was in his
directed
20s. He
Jaws?
was like
Yeah.
27. It was his second feature film. His first one was called, Sugarland Express, and he had made a film called Duel with
Oh
Dennis
yeah.
Weaver,
Right.
from McCloud, although that was a TV movie, which I guess got him his first gig and then his second gig. And no, and there was problems with the mechanical shark, so he purposely you didn't see it, right? If you're halfway into the film before you actually see the shark and the whole "we need a bigger boat" line, right? It's like when you get your first real look, and so they thought that was like a Hitchcockian sort of genius building suspense thing, when in actuality it was like kind of, it was necessary because of all the problems. They called the shark Bruce,
Yeah, I remember
um,
that. Yeah,
because,
yeah.
in real life, and then I guess there was even like Finding Nemo has a shark named Bruce, which again, all these Jaws
Oh, okay.
references
I forgot
peppered
about that.
across, you
Yeah.
know, again, and that's the thing, it's like, we talk about popular culture and the things that influenced us, or the things that kind of influenced and came across influenced. I don't think there's anything that you could match coming out of the summer of 1975. If someone wants to debate me on that, it's like something, yeah, maybe Star Wars. Okay, but still, even Star Wars was influenced by the sense it's like, yes, it was a big summer movie that people lined around the block and they built a franchise around it. But it changed, like I said, because Star Wars didn't make you afraid of space, right? And so I mean, and I can remember people getting shark tooth necklaces and and the T-shirts. There's a couple scenes where the shark doesn't look great, and but the acting is great. The script, the speech about the USS Indianapolis and how
Oh,
all these sailors, which
yeah.
I mean, it's like all these things that are
A
going.
true story,
It's
by the
just
way. That
a
really did
true
happen.
story,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
true
yeah.
story. Which it's interesting because there's about half a dozen writers, I guess, that all claim that they were the ones that actually wrote Quint's speech. Um, but the movie holds up. The actors, with the exception of Robert Shaw, who unfortunately only died a couple years later. But Richard Dreyfuss, became a huge star. I mean, he was already been in movies. Roy Scheider, all already been in movies. But again, their stardom, everybody was elevated by this film. And like I said, it holds up. You can watch it today, and it's entertaining as hell. Am I geeked up? I don't know. I feel really geeked up about this. You
Well,
can tell me to dial it down if I want to.
no, no, that's awesome. And by the way, Chris did throw down the gauntlet and say that you could debate him on this if you wanted. I'm going to say ahead of time, do not debate him. I was there for the last rant, and you do not want
Hey, hey,
a
hey.
piece of Chris. I'm telling you right now, man,
Oh, sure.
he will effing win that debate. Well, Chris, the other thing that I think is so interesting because years later, maybe 10 or 15 years after its initial release, I think this was the late 80s, I watched it again on television,
Hmm.
probably on cable television. And what struck me the most was it's two very different movies. The first part of the movie, I would say 25 to 30 minutes of the first part, is a very bad, low budget, kind of a shitty, mediocre acting kind of a movie. I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's not Jaws as we know it. It's an okay, again, kind of quaint, C or a D movie. And again, in some scenes, it's even super cheesy, like a low budget horror film. It's when they get on the boat and it's just the three of them,
The Orca.
that's when the actual movie starts. Like for me, you could have just started the movie right there because that's what made it the amazing, epic mind F, especially that story about all the guys that went into the water and the USS Indianapolis and the tiger sharks
Hmm.
came around and were eating them one at a time. And that story about waiting for the rescue helicopters and your only thought in your mind was, am I going to get out of the water when it's my turn or am I going to get
Hmm.
killed before then? You're
Right.
just like, it's like a ghost
Yes.
story and you hear the creaking of the boat and then the little joke that Hooper makes. Hooper, right?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, Matt Hooper.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Matt
Sorry.
Hooper.
Yeah. To me, that was just a very stark aspect of that movie was just the night and day difference between two films really kind of coexisting inside of each other. How don't you think about that?
That is spot on because you're right. It's kind of a melodrama. You said, yeah, a bit of overacting, and then a sense and the setup, and it's kind of like it's building, and yeah, I get it. Part of you is like, come on, okay, let's just get there, let's just get there. But you're right. You get to that second part, and it becomes an adventure, right? Especially when they get on the boat and they have like really upbeat music, everything's beautiful, blue and beautiful, and the boat's cutting through the water, and it's like I said, it's adventure, and then it becomes obviously in that last third where the adventure becomes the survival, right? The nightmarish part, and so you're right. You're no, I think that's a great analogy, and I think, but so by then you're just completely hooked. No pun intended,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But in the sense that you just, and you're cheer, the much like a couple years later when the Death Star exploded in Star Wars and everybody's like, "Hey," it's you had that same moment with the shark and the smile, you son of a and everything about it. Again, an ending that they rewrote, and it made a boatload of money. Like I said, the influence, all the sequels, the sequels from Jaws 2 to Jaws 3D to the favorite one, Jaws: The Revenge, which is where supposedly the shark is going specifically after the Brody family.
The scene that you're talking about at the very end that I guess, as you said, was rewritten for the movie, where famously the shark is chewing on the scuba tank that's filled with compressed oxygen, and of course Roy Scheider's trying his best to get a clean shot, and it's got to be in the shark's mouth. He's got to hit it with a bullet, and then it finally does explode and blows the shark, to tiny little bits. Of course, in the show Mythbusters, they did take that apart and they did look at it, and it was conclusive that that is Hollywood nonsense, that that actually wouldn't happen. If you were to successfully pierce that thing with a bullet, it would not explode like that. But hey, what am I trying to do? Ruin the movie for everybody? I guess I just did. But yeah, but
Stop, Jeff.
I always thought that was kind of interesting that that was very Hollywood, right? That never would have actually happened. But, so's everything in Hollywood, right?
Right, and in the book, Hooper doesn't survive either. So it's like let's really, pee in everybody's punch bowl, but we don't want to do that. Um, cultural touch point for me, 9-year-old me, and then 9-year-old me came out of that movie wanting to see it again, obviously, but just sort of exhilarated by, like, again, yes, that was probably I don't think Herbie Rides Again or some of the stuff I'd seen in the movies before that, or one of those aforementioned Witch Mountain movies, it didn't have that impact on me as a moviegoer, as a kid who thought, "Man, I wanna create something," or, "Man, I wanna write something," or, "Man, I just wanna, get that sort of feeling. I want someone else to feel, the way I just felt."
Yeah. And I remember all the pop culture stuff too. There was a song that was very popular at the time called Mr. Jaws. And if you don't remember this one, you do, of course. And it was a novelty
Yes,
song, just like
right.
Disco Duck or Convoy
Convoy.
or any of
Mhm.
those songs.
Right.
And this one was kind of fun because it's basically a news reporter and he's interviewing the shark on the beach and they
Mhm.
keep taking excerpts from other songs,
Other
right?
songs, right.
Like, what did the lady say? And then it would be Olivia
Mhm.
Newton-John's song, "Please, mister, please," and they would cut that in,
Right.
right? Or,
Yes. Right.
"Wouldn't you give a friend a hand?" As if he bit the
Right.
person's hand off.
"Why
I
can't
don't
we
know,
be
the whole
friends?"
"Why can't we
Yeah.
be friends?" The whole song probably
Right.
lasts all of a minute and a half, but we just thought that was the
Right.
funniest thing. Oh my god. Mr.
Right.
Jaws. Oh, he's interviewing the shark. This is comedy fucking genius.
I do remember, and I don't know if we've ever talked about it. I know you and I have talked about the comedian Richard Jenny, um, who I once had a bit about Jaws: The Revenge, and his whole thing was his whole. I could go into this whole. I'm not going to go into his whole. You could probably find it on YouTube, but it was literally like, you know, you got this problem with this shark that wants to kill you. Just staying out of the water would pretty much take care
Pretty easy fix.
Yeah, I got an idea for you. Apartment building. You know what I mean? It's like you're in an apartment, that shark's not gonna get anywhere near you, but somehow I'm gonna have to be on that water, and then the shark could get me. But that didn't matter. I think that really didn't matter because I think it's ultimately everybody because then, yes, you had movies, with lakes, Piranha, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. So now we can get those in a lake, right? Because you're not in the ocean,
Yeah.
right? So all of these things, whatever somebody the monster can get you. And again, summer coming up, uh, the big films coming up. You will see the big lines and people talking about box office and franchises and everything else owes an enormous debt to Jaws. Uh, First, it was the novel, then it was the film, and then it became the phenomenon. And I don't know, just makes me think. I don't know. Makes me want to say thanks.
I
I
will
don't know,
I will
Jeff.
say that there is, one sort of underserved group that doesn't, do well by this movie, and that is sharks. Because the one thing this movie did, and I don't mean to make this a big bummer
Correct.
thing, is
No,
it really fucked things up for sharks.
it
Because
did.
sharks became public enemy number one,
They
and
did.
they're these vicious creatures, and all they ever do is rip people apart. And of course, we all know, right? Once you actually look at the stats, like you said, Chris, it's extremely rare. You've got to be,
Mhm,
warm waters, and maybe their food supply has been threatened or something happened with a coral reef. So now they're in a different area that they're normally not in, and you're swimming
mhm.
and you look like a seal. Because as far as I've been told, and I know that we're not sharks, but I don't think they really like the way humans taste. And usually a shark attack is a couple of bites and then they kind of move on. They don't stick
Right.
around to eat the rest of the person typically because, frankly, they usually just mistake it for something else. And you see all these amazing videos, Chris, again, back to YouTube, right? Where these divers will be free diving with giant
Mhm,
great whites and tiger sharks and bull sharks and all that. And they're just tapping them on the nose and pushing them away. Sometimes they're even rubbing their bellies, but they live in complete harmony with these sharks. That now, I guess there must be a timing issue. I'm not saying sharks are always perfect, but for the most part,
mhm.
not really, your mortal enemy in the water. That's just total bullshit.
Right, right, it's to the point where Peter Benchley, who wrote the book, felt he took some blame for that, and he felt compelled. I think he made some, National Geographic special because, again, because sharks, he again, he felt responsible.
Well, Chris, I don't know what's in store for us on the next episode, but I know it's going to be an adventure. This was super cool. Thank you for sharing all those memories. It obviously had a huge impact on you and me and a million other people, as the T-shirts and bumper stickers and everything else back then have proven, right? And it still holds up to this day. And by
It
God, if there's
does.
somebody listening to this podcast that has not seen the movie Jaws, it really does hold up. You owe it to yourself to watch it. It's an incredible movie. Cool, cool. All right. Well, Chris, what do you think, man? Until next time.
Till next time, Jeff.